Howdy guys, Jimmy Song here, Off-Chain. I am here with you today because I just published an article and I wanted to talk about it at least a little bit and see what the reaction to it was. The article I posted was Why Hard Forks Are Altcoins. Let me do a screen share and take a look at it now. There we are. Yeah, there we go. And this is the article I wrote. I wrote it last night. It usually takes me a few days to write an article, but this one just sort of came flowing out. And I'm not really sure why. I don't know. Usually I write better when I'm like more emotional or something. So maybe there was some emotion involved here. I'm not really sure. But anyway, I wrote this article. Basically, it's talking about why hard forks are altcoins, or what it is. Well, first of all, like what the different sort of taxonomy of altcoins are, and then going from there. So the first thing I make clear is that Bitcoin is different than all the rest, because not only because it was first, because the software has always sort of been backwards compatible, and that's I mean, there are a couple exceptions with sort of like consensus hard forks based on like the level DB issue and things like that. But I didn't want to complicate the issue too much. Altcoins, you know, I talk about like the initial altcoins like Litecoin and Namecoin and things like that, and I go through sort of you know, what they do, and you know, ICOs being sort of like these coins that basically raise money in a certain way, and hard forks, of course. And the main distinction that I really make is that an altcoin is really you know, two things. It's software and it's a ledger, and basically when you have a ledger, you have a ledger on every altcoin, but every altcoin needs some initialization state. Like Bitcoin and Litecoin, they started out with zero. Nobody got anything, and that was it. And then it continued. With something like you know, an ICO, you know, let's start with Bitcoins. With something like Bitcoin, you know, they like just sort of pre-mined a whole bunch of money for themselves before releasing it to the public. That's sort of like initializing the ledger state so that you know, the creators get some usually considered unfair amount. With an ICO, what they do with the initial state of the ledger is they sort of sell that initial state of the ledger as a sale, right? Like they give it to the people that are interested for a particular price. With a hard fork, the initialization of the ledger comes from another coin, and that's really all it is. And even Bitcoin Cash was sort of like a pure hard fork in the sense that it took just the Bitcoin ledger and just sort of imported it into its own coin. With something like Bitcoin Gold, it was even more complicated than that. They took the Bitcoin ledger and then gave themselves some money on top as well. So it was sort of like a hybrid in the sense that they took some of the state of Bitcoin's ledger and added some additional state that favored the creators, obviously. And you know, Bitcoin Private and Bitcore are even more complicated. But basically, they're all trying to solve this problem of initial state. They're trying to figure out what it is that the ledger should look like at the beginning, because distribution is a big problem for altcoins. If not enough people have it, then how do you bootstrap a network? How is anyone going to find any value? And you know, scarcity being what it is, it's not really considered scarce if there's no real demand or distribution or ways to get it. So that's more or less why these ledgers get initialized to some state other than a blank one, which is obviously the most you know, fair and unbiased. If you initialize it to almost anything else, then you end up favoring those people in the distribution of your coin. But you know, that's just one aspect. And I argue in this article that a hard fork is essentially copying the ledger state of another coin at first, and then taking it and basically doing letting it run more or less. The software is basically what validates the ledger. And the thing about a software quote unquote upgrade, or software that changes the rules, is that all bets are off, right? Like as soon as you do software, if you create software that's not backwards compatible, it's essentially a new coin because the rules are different. If it's a soft fork, the rules are still respected. Maybe there's additional checking, but with a hard fork, the rules change, and they can be almost anything. Almost anything can go, and that's been the case, right? Like Ethereum, has hard fork multiple times, and they change the rules. And most of the time, when coins have done hard forks, usually the old software just isn't listened to at all, isn't given any value, and they just go with the new chain. What was really different, what changed all that was the DAO hack on Ethereum that caused them to hard fork because they wanted to change the ledger in a way as if the DAO hack didn't happen. And really, it was essentially a new coin saying, okay, let's just keep the state of Ethereum as it was, except for this this DAO thing, and we'll keep it going. And that causes some serious problems. I argue in this article that basically what they should be doing is taking the UTXO set, or the balances on the ledger, as it were, and just start over whenever they have a hard fork, because you would be pruning away all of the stuff that you don't really need. But nobody really does that because they want to be perceived as continuing an old chain. But in reality, they're really creating a new coin because you're adding new rules to it. Anyway, the conclusion here is more or less that, like as hard forks, because like I consider a lot of the hard forks right now like judicious, right? Like they're not changing very much. With the exception of like something like the DAO hack, which is pretty blatantly like favoring one group over another or something like that. But going forward, I expect a lot of these hard forks to be more and more contentious, right? Like and sort of bifurcating and things like that. And the temptation to change the ledger, as of any particular hard fork, will get greater and greater. And this can be sort of the choke point for regulators. Oh, you guys are doing a hard fork? Okay, now you need to, say you're Zcash or something. And they say, okay, well, you guys are doing a hard fork. We demand that you put in this secret transaction, which no one can detect, which gives the US government 1 trillion Zcash. They can do that, right? Like, and obviously, if it's open source, somebody might find that out. But regulators sort of have this choke point at which they can regulate crypto. If you have a hard fork, you're essentially starting a new coin, and that's a choke point. That's a centralization point, and that can be a very risky proposition. Anyway. Yeah, so that's what I was talking about. Let's see if there are any questions. Well, let me stop screen sharing first of all. All right, so there we are. All right. There's a troll over there. Let's see. Can BTC do a hard fork in the future if needed? That's a good question. So I'm not sure that you really need a hard fork for almost anything that you would need. You could do a block size increase like we did with SegWit. Like that was a soft fork. Could also make it even bigger using something like extension blocks. I think people have been like, okay, well, can you do something more drastic like change the proof of work via soft fork? I think you can. You can require something in the Coinbase that's essentially something like a second proof of work, and then the first proof of work, and require that to be a certain size, and then you can have both of them going. But if like one of them is broken, then one of them will be really easy, but the second one will be hard, and that'll be sort of like the restriction. There are ways to sort of get around a lot of this without something like a hard fork. And that's essentially it, right? Like when you have a hard fork, you're creating a new coin. So you don't want to do that if at all possible, because you're starting something new, basically. I mean, it's got a particular distribution and things like that, but it's got a centralized choke point the minute you hard fork, which is the whole point of the article. All right, let's see if there's any. All right, so let's see, where am I? B Classic meme is still going so strong. Will Bitcoin ever be able to hide balances and transactions? Well, it may be possible. I think Adam Back had some sort of proposal that would allow confidential transactions. Essentially, what you would do is sort of like have a second sort of ledger that's private and where you don't know the amount. The crypto around that has to be absolutely rock solid before it could be deployed on something like Bitcoin, but that's possible. The other thing that you could do is use something like sidechains and sort of silo any of the bugs into a sidechain, and you can use all kinds of sidechains to do that. Liquid and sort of a federated sidechain can work, and you can have some sort of privacy coin there. There's numerous possibilities on how that can all work. So, all right, let's see. All right, Monero fork opinion. I mean, I think they are. I don't actually know what they're doing, but I from what I understand, they split into multiple ones. So I think that's sort of the trend, is that people are realizing the old fork or the classic or whatever still may have some value as long as there are people willing to mine it and stuff. Let's see. Yeah, why don't I just ban this troll? Well, actually, I can't. Are they going to recover the lost BT? Oh, wait, I can. What am I doing? All right. All right, let's see. All right. Remove. All right, there we go. All right, so let's Monero fork. What scenario would justify why you would fork BTC? There's some sort of emergency, then maybe. Let's see. Are they going to recover the lost BTC in 5 years? I mean, the lost BTC depends which lost BTC you mean. Like BTC whose private keys have been lost, maybe. But that would require a lot of crypto being broken, and like Bitcoin would have to go through several iterations that to mitigate those risks. But it's. I mean, like the ones that have been burned, I doubt they would ever come back. Yeah, so it's hard to say. All right, so let's see. Is it better for a coin to have a soft fork philosophy over a hard fork philosophy? I certainly think so. That makes it a lot more decentralized. A soft fork is voluntary. A hard fork is not. Like it basically forces all of the network to upgrade at the same time, in part because it's a new coin. If it weren't a new coin, then you wouldn't need to, and that's it's just sort of like central dictatorship of what needs to happen. All right, what do you think about Daniel Kraus's view on forks? They give investors control, and they're like evolutionary algorithms. Actually, my argument with Daniel, I think yesterday, was partly why I was inspired to write this. It's like he was saying, well, I was asking him, okay, what about these forks? Do you like if you're a new investor, what are you supposed to do? And he said, well, just buy an equal amount of everything. I was like, well, what about these other forks, and what if you don't know about them, and so on? And he said, well, you know, there's a certain point. I didn't feel like his investment strategy had any teeth, because it doesn't give you actual direction as to what you should go get. He said at a certain point, certain forks are not worth getting. It's like, well, when are they not worth getting? If you can't define when they're not worth getting, then it's not really a strategy. It's just sort of subjective opinion about what it's about, what they think. All right, so I mean, if you have multiple competitors, and I think he was arguing more that you shouldn't have replay protection and so on. I mean, like I argued before when SegWit2x was happening, that I think a lack of replay protection, had that fork gone through, would have been good for the network, because we would have steeled ourselves against that particular line of attack, and that would have been a good thing. Unfortunately, that didn't happen, and SegWit2x kind of fell on its face. So it's fine. I don't know if that would solve anything, and I'm not sure his advice really amounts to anything more than I like the position I'm in, and that's it. And that's his opinion. I don't know if that changes anything from an investing perspective. You could, like, his argument more or less is the same as, like, you should just go buy one of every altcoin. It just so happens that the ledger is similar. I mean, it's not even the same. Like, something like Bitcoin Gold is not the same ledger as Bitcoin, because they gave themselves a bunch of money, or it doesn't have the same history really, because they added a bunch of stuff or modified it. Something like United Bitcoin's even worse. They took a lot of other coins that like, they supposedly took Bitcoin's history, but like, sort of hacked at it and changed parts that they didn't like. So I mean, it's an initialization state, and they can do whatever they want on their coin, but it's not really a hard fork per se. It's really just an altcoin. And actually, altcoins are hard forks are altcoins for that reason. All right, why is it called a soft fork? Isn't it just a new version of the software? A fork implies a split of the code base in some fashion. So a soft fork is something that's backwards compatible. It just adds new rules. So it's possible for old software to not follow these new rules, but according to the rules of the old software, if the new rules are followed consistently, then that chain is just going to follow that anyway. So it inevitably merges back to the main chain. So I mean, it could sort of fork, but it also has the possibility of, like, coming back into one chain, which is why it's called a soft fork. It's just sort of, it's not permanent. It can come back. All right, is the Bitcoin Core update submitted, captured to a peer review? I'm not sure if that's grammatically correct, but yeah, I mean, a lot of people have eyes on different PRs. At least a couple of eyes have to look at any pull request. If it's consensus critical, usually like 10 or more sets of eyes look at it. Thankfully, there aren't that many consensus critical changes. So yeah, that's it. How would Bitcoin decentralize ASIC mining if not through change in an algorithm or hard fork? See, I talked about ASIC mining in another article that I wrote a couple of weeks ago, mining centralization scenarios. I don't think that's a permanent state of things, right? Like, that's the sort of thing that only is a temporary situation. There are a lot of other manufacturers coming into this space. There are a lot of people doing different things, a lot of big companies, a lot of small companies. Bitmain happens to have a lot of the manufacturing power right now, but that's not guaranteed by any means. Now, they kind of earned their position, right? Like, they had a lot of other competitors that just simply weren't good enough. BFL Labs or CanC Miner or Cointerra or whatever. But this is the way the markets work, is that when you get big, you tend to get a little lazier, and upstarts can kind of come in and take your territory. The thing about mining manufacturing is that it has no natural network effect. If you buy a Bitmain miner, it doesn't lock you into more Bitmain miners. You can just go and get other miners, and they as long as it has better performance, then you'd go and get that. And centralization, I think, is really overrated, because the worst that they can do is sort of like double spend once or something like that. And even if that happens, or if they try to attack the network, there are ways that the rest of the network can mitigate that threat, because every user is master of their own node, and your node does not have to follow some chain that you don't agree with or you think is cheating. You can always go in a different direction. You can invalidate a particular block if you think it was done illegitimately. So there are lots of ways in which this can play out, and that's that's most of them aren't that bad, and I think that's how you get stronger as a network. So I don't see this as a problem. And I mean, that said, if it's like 2025 and Bitmain still has like 80% of all mining manufacturing capacity, yeah, then we can worry. But I mean, they've had the lead for a couple of years, in large part because they figured out the manufacturing process. They have really fantastic chip designers. They know what they're doing, right? Like they got there for a reason, but that doesn't mean that they'll stay there. And there's a lot of very competent and hungry companies that are going to come after them. So I don't worry about that much. Is BTCP more private than BTC? So Bitcoin Private was created by Red Creighton, and basically he took Z Classic, which was a fork of Zcash. Basically, they took Zcash. The reason Red started Z Classic was because Zcash had a dev tax, and I alluded to this in my article. And he wanted to take out the dev subsidy, right? Like the dev tax that's basically in every block. Plus, I think all the people that funded it get some amount of Zcash as well. So he said, all right, I want to take that out. And, he made Z Classic as a result. Now, it was a fine enough project. And I applaud that he tried to get rid of the part that, was annoying a lot of people. But then he said he saw that all these hard forks were happening, so he said, "Okay, I'm going to take all of the outputs of Z Classic and all of the outputs of Bitcoin and combine them and put it under the same code base, more or less, as Z Classic." And that's what he did. He took every UTXO from Bitcoin and imported it into a new ledger, took all of the Z Classic balances and put it into the Bitcoin Private ledger, and that's what Bitcoin Private is. And that's and the weird thing about that is that he also added a dev tax. So the thing that he was against, and the reason why he created Z Classic, he I guess changed his mind or something, because he added it back as part of Bitcoin Private. All right, you always have a pop sound when you talk, even on tone base. Something wrong with your mic? Oh, that's a good question. Let me see. I don't know if that's better. I think I have like multiple settings on my mic. I have no idea which one's good. All right, let's see. Are you? Am I mining Bitcoin? I am not. I don't think that's very profitable or a good use of my time, because that's not my forte. I think I'd rather do stuff that I'm good at. All right, let's see. I refuse to watch Andy. I don't know about Andy. Any plans to offer programming blockchain as an online course? Yes, there are plans to do that. I need to evaluate more sort of like online education portals and things like that. I mean, it's you guys have to understand, it's a really intense seminar, right? It's like hours and hours of like constant lecturing and coding and lecturing and coding, and you're constantly doing stuff. It's pretty intense, and a lot of people have likened it to like a semester or two of college crammed into 2 days. So you know, if I were to offer it as an online course, I would probably want to take things a little slower so people can do it at their own pace. But I still want all of the coding exercises and stuff that are a part of the course, and that's I think what makes it. I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong, guys. If you've taken my course, but I think that's a large part of the value of the course is in actually coding what I teach. And you know, like that's how you sort of demonstrate that you understood whatever it is that I've taught. But yeah, it can be difficult because there aren't really that many great I don't know, platforms that do all of the things that I would want. I would definitely want video. I'd want like, you know, coding tests, maybe make them even more adaptive just to make sure that people understand everything in the proper way. You know, I'd like to capture a bunch of the analytics and figure out where people trip up so I can like add lessons later to clarify that particular point. I'd like for it to be, you know, I'd like the student to have something at the end that they can call their own and sort of play with and modify so they can create more stuff. That's ultimately what I would want. I'd also want like really nice animations and things like that that help people visualize what it is that they're coding. But yeah, it can be kind of hard to find all of the requirements. So I mean, I don't know if you guys have suggestions, tweet at me or whatever. All right, is the dev tax implemented by BTCP a deal breaker? Do you see them succeed as a privacy coin? I don't know. I mean, like, here's the thing about Zcash. Like, a vast majority of the Zcash transactions are exactly like Bitcoin. Like, exactly. It's the same thing. And the reason why they, and at least the reasoning I've heard from Zuko is so that it makes like switching from Bitcoin to Zcash much easier by, you know, more or less having the same thing. But what that's ended up doing is because the zero knowledge transactions, the actual private transactions, are pretty costly in terms of CPU. For a while there, it took like a minute to actually create the transaction. And you can't do that in any volume if you're a merchant or something like that. It ended up becoming so difficult that a lot of people just weren't using it. So the anonymity set, the set that of, you know, private transactions is so small that if you're doing one of them, the fact that it's private is enough information for some people to be able to figure out who you are. So that by itself, that kind of makes it a little bit worse than say something like Monero, where every transaction is actually private by default, and you can't really expose anything unless you tell the world about it. So yeah, it can be and BTCP or Z Classic and therefore BTCP all have that same property, and this is why you can go and claim your hard fork coins off of Bitcoin Private, is because it has that feature where, you know, you can spend as a clear, you know, exactly like Bitcoin, where it's pseudonymous and not anonymous. Can you talk about Lightning Network news tech or some such instead of the weather report, which seems so trivial? Yeah, I mean, I guess we could, but there's not like that much, and some of the stuff that's coming out can be rather technical. I was actually debating whether or not I should do a video on their new thing. I can't remember what it's called. It's oh gosh, why can't I remember it? Christian Becker from Blockstream. Yeah, L2, that's what it is. Oh, yeah, L2, that's fine. That's clever. I never actually pronounced it. but yeah, L2 is sort of like a layer on top. And I haven't looked into it. I was just gonna like go and read exactly what it said and then try to translate some of the technical parts for you guys. Maybe I'll do that tomorrow or something like that, or next week. I don't know. But that might be useful. Yeah, who knows? Jimmy, how would you solve the problem of quantum computers cracking SHA-256 and then trying to get private keys? Would it be through a soft or hard fork? First of all, quantum computers have no known algorithm to crack hash pre-images. It's not possible. What quantum computers can do is use Shor's algorithm to crack RSA and also ECDSA. That's just the signature algorithm. But Bitcoin, as long as you're not reusing addresses, Bitcoin is also protected not just by ECDSA, but also by the hash pre-image problem of both SHA-256 and RIPE-MD160. So that's different, and basically, even with Shor's algorithm, you still need 2 to the 128th operations to be able to crack ECDSA. And that's still a lot of computations. And I learned a little bit more about quantum computing recently. And the way that they have to manage these qubits and stuff in order to have some sort of state is such that you have to be like really close to absolute zero in order for these quantum states to be there, and you have like these quantum gates and stuff like that. It's extremely difficult to do, and you have to do like 128 operations of that, which is already like really hard, and there's like degradation and quantum half-life and things like that you have to. There's something called quantum decay that you have to worry about. It's extremely, extremely difficult. It's not like just around the corner like a lot of technologists would have you believe. It's actually extremely difficult, really expensive, and like the manufacturing is extremely behind. So it's not so easy. And besides, there's no way to go crack SHA-256 using quantum computers, or at least no known way. If somebody comes up with a new algorithm, fine, but there's no known way to do that. And 2 to the 128th is still a very large number. And that's a lot of computations. Even with conventional computers, doing that many operations would take lots and lots of computers to do, probably more than the number of computers in the world. They usually choose like 256 bits because quantum computers can do 128, and 128 is considered like very at the upper edge of what we can do with conventional computers anyway. All right, if altcoins are garbage, do you still think it would be a good career choice to study blockchain programming? Career choice, okay. Yeah, I think Bitcoin's really good. I didn't say all altcoins are garbage. I mean, they all have, a lot of them have innovations. A lot of them are complete garbage, I agree. But some of them have some interesting innovations. I absolutely think confidential transactions and range proofs and perhaps bulletproofs and Monero are really interesting, and hopefully they come to pass. But yeah, I mean, there's plenty of jobs, doing Bitcoin stuff, right? Like, guys, Bitcoin itself is a huge innovation, and that's I believe what's going to change the world going forward. It's not blockchain technology per se; it's the sound money. Can you give your opinion on the EOS $21 billion white paper? No, because I haven't read it. Do DApps have a good use case? None that I know of. Yeah, I mean, you're forced to use a very slow database as a backend. Let's see. What's your honest opinion with Roger Ver's Btrash is the real Bitcoin? I mean, he can say whatever he wants. It looks like his lawyers told him to go and revert whatever's on Bitcoin.com. So I don't know. We'll see. Love the content. Thank you. I already said something about what is the shelf behind you. Do you play board games? Yes, we do. So a lot of board games there. I think we have a bunch of like I play a lot of board games with my kids. So we have like every expansion of Dominion. We also have let's see, we have Seven Wonders, a couple expansions there. Carcassonne, Castle Panic, Battle Sheep, let's see, Labyrinth, Ticket to Ride, Splendor. We try to keep the games like 30 minutes or less because, you know, I mean, I can't do 2-3 hour games at my age. All right, what altcoin has a legit use case? Not for me. I don't know. I'd have to study all altcoins to know. So in theory, for now, it's not possible to acquire or guess Satoshi's private keys through quantum computing. It is possible because, but again, it would be 2 to the 128th operations. What do you think about the Bitcoin private fork? I think I said what my piece already. Are decentralized exchanges a priority? I don't know. I'd like to see some sort of decentralized way of determining relative price. That would be really useful, but I'm not sure how you would do that, or if that's even possible. All right. Anyway, that's been fun. It's been about 40 minutes. I've got a bunch of other stuff, and you know, questions are kind of running out anyway. Yeah, somebody's asking about what. All right, so what would you suggest if I want to start programming the Bitcoin space? Yeah, I would suggest you know, you learn Bitcoin. Programming language, I think, is almost always overrated by beginner programmers, and usually not too concerning for veteran programmers because you can learn anything. And you know, syntax can be learned. You know, idioms can be learned, things like that. The key is just being a good programmer and having good programming practices. So you want to learn stuff like Git and source control. You want to learn stuff like unit testing and code coverage and things like that. You also want to learn, you know, how to write things in a clean way, write good, useful comments and not you know, long-winded comments and not like no comments at all. You also want to practice sort of doing things in a way that's efficient and readable for other people. These are all a part of the art of computer programming, and that's something that you should work on as you get better, because that's really what's useful out there in the real world. It isn't about knowing the best, you know, sorting algorithm given a particular state or something like that. It's more about like how to make things usable and easier to maintain and things. All right. So let's stop it here. I think I want to thank the 138 viewers. I don't get really the viewership as tone. It's a little sad, but that's okay. Anyway, thank you guys for watching, and this song is done.